Latest development, China has urged Russia and Ukraine to maintain peace talks momentum. Speaking at the UN, envoy Geng Shuang welcomed recent developments, including prisoner exchanges. He called for a political settlement, respect for humanitarian law and global support for dialogue. China says it remains committed to facilitating talks and seeking a lasting, balanced resolution to the conflict. Let's have a listen into those comments.
冲突当事方应该展现政治意愿，保持和谈势头，通过对话协商解决危机的根源性问题，达成一个公平、持久、有约束力，并被各当事方所接受的和平协议，最终实现政治解决。第二，冲突当事方应该切实遵守国际人道法，在任何情况下都避免袭击平民和民用基础设施。双方应共同努力，采取积极举措，推动战场局势早日降温。第三，国际社会，特别是重要的利益官方，应发出更多停火止战、劝和促谈的理性声音，为推动危机政治解决营造积极氛围，创造有利条件，提供。
Meanwhile, the US told the UN Security Council that its 30-day ceasefire plan in Ukraine is Russia's best possible outcome. Ukraine has already agreed to the terms. Russia, however, insists that certain conditions must be met first. Acting US Deputy Ambassador John Kelly warned that if Moscow continues the war, Washington may pull back from talks and impose new sanctions. Let's have a listen to John Kelly.
Trump has made clear we want to work with Russia, including on this peace initiative and an economic package. There is no military solution to this conflict. The deal on offer now is Russia's best possible outcome. President Putin should take the deal.
The UN's Rosemary DiCarlo says hope in Russia-Ukraine talks is just barely alive. Amid a surge of large-scale drone attacks, diplomatic efforts continue despite no ceasefire being agreed. Kyiv demands tougher pressure while Moscow denies stalling. The UN urges immediate ceasefire, stressing peace talks will take time but cannot wait. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron says the US faces a credibility test over its response to Russia's delay on a Ukraine ceasefire. Speaking in Singapore, he urged Washington to impose stronger sanctions if Moscow refuses peace. Macron said Europe is ready and hopes President Trump's frustration with Putin will lead to action. He will open the Shangri-La dialogue amid growing diplomatic pressure on Russia. Shall we listen to Emmanuel Macron?
Je ne crois pas que l'après-Kiev soit un problème de crédibilité pour les Européens. Je pense que c'est un test de crédibilité pour les Américains. Nous, Européens, depuis 3 ans, nous sommes constants. Nous sanctionnons la Russie, nous aidons l'Ukraine et nous ne voulons pas l'escalade conduisant à une nouvelle guerre.
In another development, Ukrainian drones struck Russia's Kursk region overnight, damaging a hospital and apartment buildings and injuring at least one person. Russia says the town of Kursk was targeted by a swarm of drones, with debris shattering windows at the city's main hospital. Meanwhile, across the border in Ukraine's Sumy region, fierce clashes continue. Authorities say several border villages have fallen under Russian control. Moscow has openly declared its intent to create a buffer zone in the area. In the east, Russia claims to have captured 3 more villages, including in Kharkiv and near Pokrovsk, a major target in its slow push westward. Ukraine has not confirmed these gains, but reports say over 50 attacks in the area have come over the past day. The front lines remain fluid, with both sides claiming control in different areas. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of deception for failing to deliver a peace memorandum ahead of possible talks in Istanbul. He claims no one, including the US or Turkey, has seen the document. Moscow says it's ready for talks, but Kyiv insists Russia is stalling with unrealistic demands. Trump and Turkish President Recep Erdogan still urge dialogue. The White House says President Trump, now in his second term, is determined to end the war swiftly. Well, joining us to discuss the ongoing developments from the past few hours is Dr. Swasti Rao, who is a geopolitical expert and fellow at the Manakar Parakar Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis. Thank you very much, Swasti, for being here with us. Let's first look at these comments that we've had from the United Nations meeting. The US set their stall out, saying that Russia must agree to a ceasefire, or the US will potentially withdraw from talks. How significant is this threat, and do you think it will stand given the rhetoric that we sometimes get from the US administration, which seems to sometimes contradicts itself?
Now, good afternoon, Joshua. Cutting a long story short, I do not have any expectation from the recent push towards peace talks. Please understand that there are internal dynamics that are fueling the direction in which the war is going. For President Putin, he has to show tangible results in form of this 3 to 4 years of grinding attrition that he has been undergoing. There is a war economy which is activated in Russia, and the entire economic output is completely centered around what is being produced for the war, and Russia has been cut off from sanctions, getting deepened with North Korea and China. So I mean, there are internal dynamics that are fueling this war, and as one can also see that Donald Trump's patience with President Putin has been running out, and he has said that if President Putin is not willing for the peace talks, then he's going to levy more sanctions and serious sanctions on Russia, which will have implications for other partners as well, including for India, because these are going to target the oil sales from Russia that we actually land up buying in huge quantities. So cutting a long story short, like I said, that I do not see any hope from the recent calls for any peace negotiations. Please understand that whatever can be referred to as a logical off-ramp does not exist right now. And on the contrary, the Russian side has been preparing for a summer counteroffensive. You already see that there's pressure mounting on the Sumy region. In fact, it doesn't mean much because they will still not be able to capture it fully unless they really change their fighting tactics. But it would mean that Ukraine would have to then also spread their already thin human resource from Donetsk all the way to Sumy. So I personally do not see this ending anytime soon, and I do not have any hopes from whatever UN or Turkey, etc., are mediating.
Yes, we're just playing some of the quotes from Emmanuel Macron. Of course, we heard his comments as well. He says the US faces a credibility test, and of course, the EU nations have called for US sanctions on Russia. They themselves, the European Union, have put countless, more than a dozen separate sanctions on to Russia. Do you think that this is something that the US could move towards if there isn't progress in the immediate term from Russia?
Yes, I mean, also if you go by sanctions and if you read the statements of Tammy Bruce, who's State Department spokesperson, I mean, you can see that Donald Trump's, patience has been running out, and he eventually has realized that his appreciation of President Putin or his personal, friendship with President Putin is perhaps not going to be enough to really land a kind of a deal that will stay, because Donald Trump has negotiated certain very hurried ceasefires that have not lasted beyond 3 hours. So obviously, Donald Trump had oversimplified the situation in Eastern Europe. And I guess if you also look at the sanctions bill, which is co-authored by Senator Lindsey Graham, who, of course, is Trump's, one of his most prominent legislative allies. If you also see in the recent days, it continues to gather more support in the upper chamber. And this measure, I think whenever it is on the table, it would be very, very stringent. It would be about more than 500% tariffs on any country that buys Moscow's, like I said, oil and energy products. And this obviously would have implications for China and India, and especially for India, because India, unlike China, is not on the side of Russia, or in the war. India has taken a very neutral position. So I think this is something that we are observing very, very carefully. Of course, it is in everybody's interest that the war comes to to an end. But currently, in terms of the internal dynamics conflicts, I do not really see anything going further. So, coming again, just to connect to the threat of the sanctions, yes, I do believe that it probably will be managed a little bit better. It should be managed a little bit better from Russia's side. And I do see that President Putin will come again and give a few more assurances on ending the war or delaying the peace negotiations, like it happened recently when he was just going to sign for the peace negotiations. And then he said that first he would like to meet President Zelensky in Istanbul. And actually, he never really landed in Istanbul. So you would see a bit of that dilly-dallying and delaying tactics from Russian side, because like I said, that for Russia, for President Putin, it is immensely important to give a tangible, positive result in terms of what can be labeled as a victory. And please remember that even after 3.5 years of intense fighting, the 4 annexed regions of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, none of these regions is actually won by Russia militarily 100%. So the situation on the ground is far more complex than what seems when people are trying to negotiate, these ceasefires in an oversimplified manner. Please also remember that even though Ukraine is going through a severe crisis, I would say, of manpower, but they have more than made up for the shortfall of ammunition through their innovative drone techniques. So long and short is that I do not see this war really ending, not at least in the 2025 or early 2026.
Yes, well, diplomatic efforts, of course, are ongoing to put pressure on a potential peace deal with those strikes. Also reported military action continuing. We will be across all of those developments. Dr. Swasti Rao, thank you ever so much for joining us today.